following podcast contains explicit language and spoilers for the film Reservoir Dogs. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to DVD Clutter, Episode 2. I'm Heather.
And I'm Mattie.
And this is a show where we are revisiting films in our DVD collection to decide if they stay or go. This episode is 1991's Reservoir Dogs, written and directed by Quentin Tarantino.
Here are your names. Mr. White, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Pink.
Why am I Mr. Pink?
Who cares what your name is?
Yeah, that's easy for you to say. You're Mr. White. You have a cool-sounding name.
And I would like to start off by asking you, Mattie, why is this movie in our DVD collection?
So, first of all, Reservoir Dogs is a film about a group of jewel thieves who, in the aftermath of a disastrous heist that turned very violent, they basically look around at each other and try to figure out which among them is to blame, which of them is the rat. And it's basically about the tension that builds between them. It's in our collection because Quentin Tarantino was kind of a formidable filmmaker for me. When I was young, I think I was in middle school or high school when I first saw Pulp Fiction. I saw the opening scene of the film. I had never seen anything like it. And from that point on, I knew that I had to somehow be involved in filmmaking, in movies, that like suddenly everything that we had been taught in literature classes in school and, you know, like it all just kind of clicked for me in that opening scene of that film. And, you know, obviously Quentin Tarantino has had a bit of a fall from grace over time. I haven't liked any of his films in the past, like 10 years, more or less. Hateful Eight, I guess, was okay. But, you know, he's certainly been in the news a lot lately.
He definitely has. And for those of you who don't know, he was on a podcast and he was talking about the film There Will Be Blood, specifically about the performance of Paul Dano. And he called Paul Dano weak sauce.
So you put him with the weakest male actor in SAG? Right? The limpest dick in the world?
And basically just listed off the names of a few other actors he didn't like, including one of my most beloved actors, Matthew Lillard of Scream fame and
we all love Matthew
Shaggy,
Lillard.
Scooby-Doo. And I just kind of felt like, wow, I knew Tarantino was kind of a jerk, but for a director to be picking on actors who he hasn't even ever worked with, and for a director of his status to be calling out names like that, I thought was really unprofessional and just kind of a real asshole move.
And it was really, I think a lot of it is like the way that you do it. You know, it seemed like particularly pointed that, you know, he's saying these really dismissive things about these really respected, well-liked people in the industry. And, you know, as we saw in this film, Quentin Tarantino doesn't exactly have his own great acting chops. You
Absolutely.
know, like the film opens on this very famous scene where he's talking about Madonna.
Okay, let me tell you what Like a Virgin's about. It's all about this Coos, who's a regular fuck machine. I'm talking morning, day, night, afternoon. Dick, 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 dick.
How many dicks is that?
A lot.
I'm not very well versed in Madonna. So, you know, you tell me if you think that has any sort of reality to it. I don't know. Like
I don't
a virgin
really think
enough.
so. I'm not really sure. I think the opening scene where they're all in a diner having breakfast and, you know, Tarantino's going off on Madonna's Like a Virgin, that kind of turned me off right from the get-go. I was kind of like, yep, this is exactly what I don't like about Tarantino movies, because from the get-go, he's just making some kind of like very misogynistic comments, and then it goes right into a conversation where the character of Steve Buscemi doesn't want to put in his dollar for a tip and why he feels that waitresses shouldn't be tipped. I thought that portion of the dialogue I thought seemed a lot more where I'm like, okay, this is where Tarantino kind of shines, because Buscemi does come off as the asshole there, but, you know, kind of just starting off from a place of misogyny, I was like, yep, this is exactly what irks me about a lot of Tarantino movies.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what I was a little bit nervous about going back and watching this one.
And I definitely think, because I do really love a lot of his early films, and, you know, I'll be honest, this one, it still works for me. It there's so many moments in it where they say things like, I'm not defending this part of it, but, you know, because I was curious if going back, the magic would still be there, because it's my least favorite of his early films. It has a lot of really objectionable stuff. It's got probably the most prominent scene that Tarantino was ever in, and he is weak sauce as an actor, if I may say so. I'm only going that far, first of all, because he casts himself in the role.
Sure.
Second of all, because he went there first. You know, I think that was it's just really bad form to kind of be sabotaging someone else's career when you have the kind of status and cachet that Tarantino has.
Yeah.
And I really do think that that his performance and, you know, his sort of self-satisfaction with his own cleverness, it turns me off too. That said, the reason that I think overall, despite everything else, I think that scene and a lot of the film still works is kind of something that was very novel at the time, which is the idea that you take a film based around this jewel heist, and instead of making the jewel heist the focus of the film, you make it about how the characters interact, what they do when they are not in the middle of the heist. And I think that's where, you know, when you consider the fact that they're having that conversation on the way to go rob a jewelry store, it adds a bit of suspense, but we don't know that necessarily at the beginning. But there's that kind of contrast where we go from people at a diner just kind of talking, you know, just kind of having a conversation about pop culture. What are you listening to on the radio? And then cut immediately to Tim Roth in the back seat with, you know, just covered in gallons and gallons of blood, screaming while poor Harvey Keitel is driving, trying to calm him down.
I'm gonna die! Just hold on, buddy boy! I'm gonna die! Hey! I'm sorry! I can't believe she killed me, man! Who the fucking got that? Hey! Just cancel that shit! Right now!
I think it's effective, and I ended up kind of getting caught up in it watching it this time. And I was not sure that I would.
I feel kind of the opposite. I don't actually feel like this one really holds up for me, and I feel like there are scenes in the movie that work, but I don't feel like it goes far enough for me. I don't feel like I ever get a real sense of the characters. I feel like the flashbacks are kind of short, and I think that what it's doing a lot of things that Pulp Fiction does, but Pulp Fiction does it so much better.
Agreed.
And I understand this was his first film. That being said, I think that the strongest parts for me is Tim Roth's performance. I think is really great in the movie. I think he really carries the movie. I mean, there's great performances throughout, but I think he specifically is really great. And I think most of the best scenes are, you know, we've got the commode scene, we've got the commode story.
That, as I look back, as much as I think Tarantino probably intended that opening diner scene to sort of be his trademark, you know, by making it the opening scene and by casting himself and making, you know, putting the director in the scene, basically kind of defining what would become his style for the next 10 years. It's the commode scene that's really kind of stuck, where you have the idea, that link between acting and criminality, or acting and violence. Right. That idea that you know, everything is kind of based on this sort of deception, and you see that a lot in his later films as well, even though I think a lot of times it's used to a lesser effect.
Yeah.
Like that, like you see it in Inglourious Bastards, where, you know, you have these characters who have to build characters of their own, and this is kind of like the purest distillation of that idea.
Yeah. I think for me what doesn't work is when I'm watching a movie like this and I'm trying to sort of identify with the criminals to an extent, I like them to be kind of ambiguous. I like them to also have some likable qualities, and I don't really feel like any of the characters in this movie do. Not in the way that the characters in Pulp Fiction do, or in like a movie like Goodfellas.
I was thinking of Goodfellas a lot, because Goodfellas also has like that kind of like you know, that kind of casual racism of these characters. But Goodfellas is also a period piece where their racism makes a little bit more sense. The particular flavor of racism, at least.
Yeah.
And I also feel like it's portrayed in a way in Goodfellas where you laugh at it.
Right.
And in this, I feel like they just kind of keep bringing up all of these really racist observations. You know, like every story has some sort of like racialized element to it.
Right.
That ends up just like, I'm not sure why it has to be that. It doesn't make the characters like more engaging. It just makes me feel uncomfortable, like, because so much of it is kind of like a hangout movie.
Yeah.
And these are people, you know, anytime I start to sort of like get drawn into like Harvey Keitel's character, for instance, you know, he's kind of, you know, he's kind of keeping everybody on an even keel, or you've got like, you know, sort of the crime boss who's like busting everybody's balls, and you have Steve Buscemi as, you know, sort of the asshole, like over opinionated libertarian that we've all had to have those conversations with. But you're right, there's like nobody. I don't think Tim Roth really is the character that we end up like. I don't think we have enough of a connection to him to sort of, you know, feel that kind of identification. It's never commented upon. And the fact that a lot of this stuff keeps coming up in Tarantino's films also makes you wonder, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what is this about?
It's definitely, and you know, I knew this I knew going back this was going to be another issue, was that the way he writes a lot of his dialogue is very racist, and there are a lot of racist conversations, and for seemingly no, you know, it's not adding anything to the story or the plot. It's just because I don't know why he wants it in there, or what he thinks.
He just thinks it's funny.
Yeah, and it just makes me uncomfortable. It's not something, I don't find these characters endearing. Like, I don't want to hang out with them anymore. You know, I don't find myself wanting to go back and be like, oh yeah, I really want to, you know, rewatch that, because I really find, you know, even you know, I think in a movie like Goodfellas and Pulp Fiction, and you know, a lot of other crime movies that are kind of fun to watch. One that I also recently rewatched, which is a different kind of movie, but like Wolf of Wall Street, you're following these characters and there is an element of fun to them, even though they are criminals. I think that they're just written in a way that really kind of humanize them to an extent. Like, their flaws are there, but you feel the humanity in them. And I feel like in this one, there's just something really keeping me from connecting with any of these characters there. And I think it feels very sort of pretentious to me. Like, it is a little bit overwritten, and it's a little bit like, do you have something you want to say there?
just that I think the difference is Tarantino loves to write characters to be cool, to be his idea of cool. Even like they even talk about it in the movie where it's where he's like, Joe Cabot is really cool. You know, people describe each other as cool, and like there's this like bravado that they always have to have. You know, they always have like this kind of like Western movie idea of like, you can't be the one to back down from a conversation. And you know, that with the exception of probably Steve Buscemi, nobody's really made to look uncool in the process. And I think that's where, you know, a movie like Wolf of Wall Street, again, or Goodfellas, when Scorsese does it, we're laughing, And part of why we're laughing is because the characters are so absurd. It's something that we've seen in our lives, and we recognize it, and we see why it's pathetic.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a reason why I can't really get lost in this movie, because I'm never feeling at any point like I'm not watching a movie. I'm just so engrossed in the story. I feel like Tarantino has written everything to be this very specific and cool way, and I feel like it's just overwritten, and I feel too much of him in the movie and not enough just actual character. And I feel like even for the actors in this particular Tarantino movie, because I feel like this isn't so much an issue in some of his later films, but in this one I feel like they're not really given the opportunity to sort of just like breathe and like live in their own, you know, in the world of their character.
I think they are, but it's different because there's not like the same sort of like character arcs that you would have in like because we're not connected to the characters, because they're all anonymous. Everybody's using an alias. Everybody is, we only see them through the lens of this one situation. And I kind of like that. I feel like that leaves a lot more to the imagination for me. I think it's an effective tool, and especially when you consider that, you know, if it's your first movie, I can feel the scrappiness of it as well, you know, where like, you know, you can tell that they had like no money, that every dime got put into getting the cast together and everything else, you know, like really like, so, and, you know, is just another thing that drives so much to be off screen. So I think what holds it back, and this is kind of funny considering how many screenplay Oscars Tarantino has, I don't think he's a very good writer of dialogue, writer of characters. I think that his real strength is in the staging and the direction, and there's a lot of confidence here. I love how, you know, there will be just a static camera and characters will just walk in and out, and we'll just be looking at a blank wall for when they're not there, and I'm like it's effective. Like that's where I think the characters get to breathe in that sense. It's not just a series of close-up shots of dialogue. Characters have, you know, they'll take time to think before responding. It's staged very thoughtfully. But I think you're right. You know, I think that, like, I was thinking about our conversation about Bad Santa and how, you know, it sort of came back to, okay, like this is kind of, you know, a kind of like romp. It's you know, kind of like the whole premise is based on this kind of like filthy, edgy character, and where is the heart? And this is a movie that has very little heart. Yeah. And I think that's where, you know, that's where revisiting it, it's like I'm looking for that. And there's like, I want to find it in the scene where, you know, where Tim Roth asks, you know, tells Harvey Keitel, "I'm scared to death, please hold me." Like, that's such a rare piece of vulnerability for that character. But everything that happens afterward undermines it because it wasn't a sincere connection between the two characters because Tim Roth is lying to him. Right.
It's actually pretty interesting because I was thinking during that scene of how, because I do actually find that scene kind of difficult to watch because, you know, the Tim Roth character is genuinely scared that he's going to die. And I think, you know, Keitel's character is, I find it sort of interesting because he kind of for a second drops that performative masculinity that's in so much of the movie. Yeah. And I'm like, see, he's trying to connect by saying like, what, are you a doctor? Like, are you a doctor? Like, it's sort of like...
But it works.
And it works, you know, it works. I think that's probably one of the more effective scenes for me in the movie. And I think also I just want to talk a little bit about like performative masculinity in this movie because I feel like it is just permeating the movie. Yeah. I'm not sure what to really make of it because I do feel like I think I take away from this movie a lot of racism and a lot of misogyny and a lot of kind of things that I do see in a lot of the other Tarantino movies that I'm kind of interested to revisit now and sort of wonder if they're going to hold up for me in the ways they did when I was younger, because I think that when I was younger, I saw a movie like this and I said, that's really cool. And now I see it and I say, you know, I have a hard time. I really am saying, like, these guys are just a bunch of assholes. Like, everything that comes out of their mouth is terrible. And this sort of who's the tough guy. Like, there's also that scene where is it Mr.
and who's professional as well.
And who's professional. And
like that to me, it's like at the time, you know, you watch it when you're younger, and that's kind of what your takeaway is that, like, you know, is that Harvey Keitel is doing crime the right way.
Right.
And it's so stupid.
Yeah, it's very stupid. Another scene that comes to mind is the one where the Michael Madsen character is having the meeting, and you know, him and the boss's son, I guess I'm gonna call him boss, I forget what his name is, but you know, they get into this like weird
they
tussle
literally
that's
start wrestling in the middle of the meeting in the boss's office.
It's like, in order to connect with each other, I need to make a joke about how me and your dad are having a conversation about how you're shitty at doing your job, and then we're gonna have this like fake little tussle here in your office, and then I'm gonna call you a homophobic slur, and that's how we're gonna connect as men.
Yeah. Yeah. the other thing I noticed about that scene is, like, I can see, like, the screenplay at work in the setup to it, because, you know, you've got that character Joe, who's, you know, like the crime boss.
Yeah.
He's on the phone with somebody saying, don't worry about making your payments this month. You're going through a tough time. We'll get you squared away down the road. That is not how this works. That's not how loan sharks works. That's not even how banks work.
Yeah.
You know, it's just absurd, and it's like, why are we humanizing this character?
Yeah.
You know, why are we faking to make like why are we suddenly deciding we're going to throw something in to make him more likable?
Yeah.
Sorry, go.
No, I was just thinking too, again, and I'm going to bring up Goodfellas again, because in the, you know, classic scene in Goodfellas, the you think I'm funny scene, same sort of thing, where it's like the men are sort of connecting through this, like, you know, sort of like ribbing each other, and like, how far can we take this joke? You know, how uncomfortable can I make you? But there is still something that makes it so much more endearing, and that works for me, because you can see their...
You see how Ray Liotta suddenly has to recalculate. You know, he has to be like, oh, did I step in it? Because anything can set this guy off.
Yeah.
My job to stay alive is to keep him happy.
It's a chess game of, like, how to sort of, you know, how to navigate these kind of relationships in this crime world. And
it's like, it's how you navigate abusive relationships as well.
And I think the thing with, like, Goodfellas is that, again, we're sort of turning it on its head. Like, we're looking at it as, oh God, these guys are really, this is really fucked up. Like you said, this is like an abusive relationship. Whereas I think that in Reservoir Dogs, it's more straightforward. I don't think we're really, like, I think it's taking itself much more seriously.
I don't know what we're supposed to think about the characters. I think that, like, you know, it's supposed to, like, we're supposed to think of it like a Western, like, you know, it's sort of an honor among thieves sort of thing. Or, you know, like a samurai movie, all these films that inspired Tarantino. But again, there's not, like, and I'm saying all this while also acknowledging that, like, for me, the film still works, I think, but if you're looking for heart, you're not going to find it here.
I think it is the making, you know, it is the beginnings of a very skilled filmmaker, at least in his early movies. I don't think, for me, I can't really internalize this movie in a way that I can some other movies like Pulp Fiction or Jackie Brown or Kill Bill maybe, but this one just doesn't really work overall for me. But I see what you're saying, and I do see the beginning of, you know, who that filmmaker would become.
I think that what really struck me this time is just sort of the way that this film and Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown the way that they show LA in the 90s, there's just, it feels like a fantasy land, but also feels very realistic, and forgive the cliche, but it feels gritty while also being like completely fantastical. And I think a lot of that, as I watch it this time around, is I can really attribute to the sound editing and the sound mixing and the way that they use the radio that keeps coming on. And at one point, you hear a needle drop in like the car of the cops that are tailing the thieves, and then cuts to in the thieves' car, and they're listening to the same station at a different volume. You're listening to it in the garage, and Michael Madsen as Mr. Blonde walks outside to get something from the car, and suddenly like it's just complete silence. So all the screaming that the cop was doing as he's being tortured inside, we realize that nobody can hear him.
Yeah.
What did you think of Michael Madsen in the film?
I didn't really care for his performance. And I know this was something we were sort of talking about also in regards to the weak sauce comments. I don't really care for his performance. I think it's a very restrained performance, and I don't really think he's bringing anything other than I'm Michael Madsen and Tarantino likes to work with me energy to this movie.
I think that, so part of the thing is like the question of whether he's a psychopath, and I think pretty clearly he is. And I think he kind of does bring that, but it also, like, I think again Tarantino's looking at his performance and saying, wow, he's so cool. Nothing's touching him.
Right.
And I'm looking at his performance like, wow, this is someone who can't feel emotion. This is someone who has to like piss off everyone around him and just be like just an agent of chaos, and say everything to get under everybody else's skin, because hurting other people is the only way that he knows how to feel anything.
And I think that's one thing that, does work for me is Harvey Keitel's character and his performance, because I think he is giving a little more of a nuanced performance there, where he's like, hold on a second, let's actually figure out what's going on before we just like jump the gun and do something really crazy and violent. Where I feel like the Madsen character is just, he's just off the deep end. I felt like the violence too in the movies, and I'm not opposed to violent movies at all. I
know you're not opposed to violent movies. You love violent movies.
But I don't know, something about this one, the violence in it, I really don't like it. It really rubs me the wrong way. Maybe it's Madsen's performance here, because it's just so it's so icy, and it's so I'm not getting anything really from like.
When I was watching the torture scene, I was thinking actually of one of your favorite films, which is Clockwork Orange, and how they use music to sort of like turn this really awful action into sort of like some sort of expression of joy. In Clockwork Orange, they did that with Singing in the Rain, where characters are singing that as they're assaulting couple in their home.
Yeah.
And in this, they're playing oh my gosh, what's the song?
The 70s song that I can't even remember off the top of my head.
Stuck in the Middle with You.
Stuck in the Middle with You.
Stuck in the Middle with You. So Stuck in the Middle with You is playing, and it's sort of putting us, because he has control of the situation, because he has control of the radio, we're understanding how Mr. Blonde is feeling in that moment, or how he's performing for the cop at how he wants the cop to think that he's feeling.
Yeah.
It's something where it's like, it is trying to present it as cool.
Yes, and I think another reason why the violence doesn't work here for me is because this is just a random character. We have absolutely zero backstory on this cop character, right? It's literally just a guy he picked up during the.
We get it. We get a little bit. We know like there's a little bit that we can infer from it later on.
But that's after the conversation
Yeah.
really between him and Mr. Orange. And I think for me it just doesn't work. It's just too it's too gratuitous. There's just nothing I'm really getting from it that I didn't already get from like
It's a thing I see a lot with like writer directors, and I think this was kind of a trend that Tarantino kicked off with this film of writer directors who write movies based on other movies that they've seen rather than like a lived experience or a genuine curiosity. And that's where, a film like Goodfellas or a film like Wolf of Wall Street, there's really a lot of attention to detail in terms of capturing how it felt for the real people in those real situations. And a lot of it is drawn from the lived experiences of Martin Scorsese growing up surrounded by a lot of this stuff. Tarantino grew up in Tennessee, and he's writing all of these, like, I guess, like New York transplants into, who are in LA. Everybody talks like they're characters from a New York crime movie. From what I understand, a lot of like the specific scenes are lifted shot for shot from other films in like Asian cinema. I meant to look that up beforehand. I might cut something in there.
There's a whole story about this Hong Kong movie, City on Fire. If you've ever seen City on Fire, it's very, very different from my movie. The section that they say I took, I did take from it, all right? Absolutely, I took from it, all right? But it's a very different movie. They actually talked to the director, Ringo Lam. He goes, wow, Tarantino took the last 10 minutes of my movie, made an entire movie about it. Well, that's a fucking different movie. That's very, very different.
It's not sincere, and I think it's because his interest is in his own writing more than it's in the story itself. And, that, again, that's something that I see a lot. I know that there's kind of a back and forth, especially lately, especially around There Will Be Blood and with the release of One Battle After Another, while Tarantino released nothing.
Yeah.
He's going to talk shit about Paul Thomas Anderson, who just released the most celebrated movie of the year. And that's another one where I felt like there were scenes in it that I can feel the screenwriting.
Right.
And I can feel the screenwriting in a way that seems insincere to me, that seems like you had an idea that you're going to force onto these characters rather than the characters experiencing and expressing themselves and acting in the moment.
Right.
It doesn't take me out as much in this film as it does in a lot of other films, but it is an element there, definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And for me, it does sort of bother me where he's got to work in these clever, this clever dialogue, and everything everyone says is always cool, and every conversation is cool or is somehow, like he comes up with these little bits of clever, like the conversation about tipping, which in and of itself is, a conversation you could probably have a lot, but it's like he's got to force these things in. He's got to force them in, and even if they take away from the story, I guess that scene sort of works because I guess it's a little telling about Buscemi's character, but like
I also think that, like, I remember hearing back to interviews with Tarantino. This was back when there would be special features on DVDs, and you'd really like spend a lot. If you were interested in a film, you'd spend a lot of time watching them. And I was interested in Tarantino films when I was younger, so I watched a lot of that, and I watched a lot of I've read a lot of criticism of his works, and one of the things that I think it's a Godard quote that, or might not, I don't remember who the original quote was, but somebody said you'd have a more interesting film if you just took the scenes that are cut out of most films, and that was kind of the motivating factor, sort of like the inspiration for a lot of Tarantino's approach, at least in those early years. I think he's dropped it, and I think his films have gotten worse since he has. But the idea that, instead of focusing on the heist, you're going to focus on the fact that these are characters who just talk bullshit to each other.
And some in some cases, I think it really does work, and in others it doesn't. I think that's just, that's just something. And I think Tarantino can also be really polarizing with that. Some people really can't stand the way that he writes the dialogue, and this is actually, I think, probably his shortest runtime. I think it's at like an hour and 40 minutes. Most of his movies are really long.
They've definitely gotten longer over
They've
time.
gotten longer and longer. We've got Sally Menke here editing. It's a very tight film, I think, compared to any of his other films. I can't really think of another film that's as tight as this film.
I think you could make a case for Kill Bill Volume 1. I don't remember how long
Yeah,
that is.
that's true. Yeah.
Actually, I take it back because Tarantino did have a new film come out this year. It's Kill Bill. They re-released Kill Bill.
Full, yeah.
And I think that might have been why he was on the podcast in the first place.
Yeah. So, kind of interesting. It doesn't always bother me with his dialogue, but I do feel like, especially in some of his, I think the most recent movie of his that I've seen was Hateful Eight. So we're going back a few films, but I remember that one just really boring me.
And to me, it's like I think he had his last 3 films, and that was the only one that I was like, this is watchable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like Django Unchained. There were moments that I thought worked, but overall, I thought it was a really uneven, terrible film.
Yes.
And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I really, really hated.
Yeah.
And maybe we revisit that at some point and talk about why, because I don't want to just be, I don't want to just be like the cinematographer who's coming on here and just talking shit about somebody else's work and about somebody else's personality.
Sure.
You'd have to be a real asshole to do something
Right,
like that,
exactly.
don't you think so? But like to me, it's like if I'm saying that something's not working, I'm doing so in the hopes of engaging with the work, in the hopes of engaging with, and for the sake of this podcast, engaging with you.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say that every Tarantino movie I rewatch from here on out, I'm going to have the same opinion that I'm totally writing him off as some director whose movies I can enjoy. I'm just, and honestly, going into Reservoir Dogs, I didn't think it was going to hold up for me because it's never really been like a top tier Tarantino film for me anyway. I think I saw it, it was probably the second Tarantino movie I saw after Pulp Fiction. I went back and, watched Reservoir Dogs, and I was like, yeah, it was fine. It's pretty good. I think this is only the second time I've really watched it. So for me, it's never really been one that I've, really been like, this is part of my pantheon of great films.
So I guess to that point, I take it your vote is to eliminate it from the collection.
My vote is I cut it.
Okay, I'm a little torn. I figured I was going into this conversation thinking I definitely want to keep it, but after the conversation, I'm starting to wonder. I'm like, you know what? We still have a lot of like you're kind of talking me into it, into getting rid of it. Not because I necessarily think it's a bad film, but is it good enough to make the cut?
Well, then I think that's kind of the point of this podcast is, are these movies that reflect where we are in our lives now? Are these movies that we really want to be part of our...
And this is not the formidable film for me, for Tarantino.
Right.
He's had formidable films. This was always one that I watched and I thought, this is a really good movie.
Right.
This is one... It actually probably took me a couple viewings actually to kind of get really get on the wavelength of this one.
Yeah.
But I watched it a lot.
Yeah.
And, this is not really... I don't think this one is one that necessarily... I could probably take or leave it. And since you're voting to leave it, I guess I changed my opinion during the course of this conversation. And I guess that's it. We're cutting Reservoir Dogs. We're taking out, we're putting on K. Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s, and we are taking out a straight razor, and we are cutting Reservoir Dogs from the collection.
Okay, it's official. All right.
Before we finish, I did just want to ask you, because the needle drops are such a defining character of Tarantino's films overall, and this one in particular. Were there any that stuck out to you? And I think I know the answer because you were humming it.
It's I Can't Stop I Can't Stop This Feeling.
It's Hooked on a Feeling.
Hooked on a Feeling,
with
yes.
the Ooga Chakas at
right,
the
and
beginning.
I mean, I'm taking back. I mean, I'm gonna really probably date myself here, but there was the episode of Ally McBeal with the dancing baby, and it was the viral thing, and it was that song. So that's why like it got stuck in my head, and it's kind of what I was thinking of when I heard that.
Which is funny because what I was thinking of, I know that you were never into the superhero films, and I'm kind of in and out of them. I'm not really a big fan of, sort of the effect that Marvel has had on cinema, and I haven't watched a lot of Marvel films, but one exception, in my opinion, that I did really like was the original Guardians of the Galaxy. I never saw any of the sequels, but that's a prominent song.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So that's where we are. We're kind of. And other things to mention is, I feel like we do have to give a Harvey Weinstein alert every time his name's
probably going to be in half of our movie collection.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's an important thing to acknowledge.
It is. Oh, especially the relationship between Weinstein and Tarantino.
And if we ever get into other Tarantino films, I don't think it's so much echoed in this one, but I think in a lot of his later films, there is a lot more of an interest in kind of the ethics of doing a craft, and usually the craft is some sort of crime or some sort of violence. But there's also such a relationship in those films as far as like having to appease power in order to either pursue your dreams or survive or pursue your goals.
Right.
And, how different characters navigate that and what the morality of doing that is, that I think is really interesting. It doesn't really get engaged with here, but I do think that's something that's kind of worth exploring, and I've kind of wanted to in, a public sort of criticism format for a very long time, because I've picked up on it. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yes, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more Tarantino movies to go through as we do this rewatch. Okay, so that about wraps up our episode on Reservoir Dogs. And Mattie, why don't you tell us what you're thinking about for next episode?
So I'm thinking that for next episode that we look at a film that has been in our collection forever and I have never seen. People have been recommending it to me for years, and I've just never gotten around to it, and that is Donnie Brasco.
Great. Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to it. So we will see you next time on DVD Clutter.
Let's do that. Let's do that again.
DVD.
Okay.
DVD Clutter.
They're the Reservoir Dogs.
Hey, Joe, want me to shoot this guy?